Hello, everybody. I'm Shilpa Karkeraa, the CEO and founder of Myraa Technologies. Myraa Technologies is a company that works across 11 industries in AI and blockchain solutions. But the biggest pain point that I saw across my experience is when the healthcare infrastructure broke. So my today's motivation is to talk about those experiences and how you and I can solve that using good DevOps processes in healthcare. These are the recognitions that we are responsible with, and I believe that we all at GITEX today as well, when we attend things, I think we can all be a part of the change. So let's know a little bit about myself, and then you all, and then let's have the talk to make it more meaningful. So like every speaker's dream, it has to be an interactive talk, and I'll try with this space as well. So I've been the founder of Usha Renal Care Foundation, which helps information exchange for healthcare applications, as well as clinical trials. Global top 20 of Goldman Sachs Growth Fellowship, and an author of Unlocking Blockchains on a Shore. Now, I would love to know about the audience as well. So how many are business leaders here? How many technology contributors? How many from coding backgrounds, programming? Nice. How many from healthcare? Nice to see. How many from manufacturing, maritime, oil and gas? Okay. We all have a role in this, so that's why I'm asking. Cool. So this is the context that we have today. Why are we talking about DevOps, responsible DevOps in healthcare? What is the current situation? What can we do about it with leveraging the principles of DevOps? And how can we act about it? So in the pandemic, we saw that 45 million users were affected with healthcare data breaches. And this is really, really sad in this era. Imagine if it was your data right now that's leaked on while you're probably giving a job interview at a place, and that's personal to you, maybe, right? And if it's your information that's shared or misused, and you never know about it. Similarly, on another context, there are shortages in the supply chain as well. When we saw that PPE kits, the oxygen tanks, the raw materials for sanitizers, on a global level, across countries, there were shortages. And there was a big black market in terms of the shortage and the information and the trade across it. And this is, again, a part of the data breach that we saw. Apart from it, there were a lot of leakages in terms of the security credentials on platforms. So let me tell you, 2020, there were 90,000 apps that were a part of the internet, which were providing healthcare solutions. 2021, there are 350,000 apps, and that amount is crazy, because imagine the number of apps that are coming out in the healthcare space, and are they completely vetted, checked, regulated, and so on? And that's a big question, and I think that's why we could see that this guy, super exhausted with the situation, because it was quite inconvenient for all of us in the pandemic, and to see the shortages, to see the data breaches, and a broken healthcare infrastructure. Totally needed us all to take a deep, deep breath. Next is the healthcare compliance acts that have been put up recently. So the HIPAA Compliance Act has been there previously, but the 2022 was a revised one. Now, we need to know about all of these, because even if you don't develop healthcare apps, you could easily be a part of the checker or the regulation checks that can happen, because the scale of the number of apps that are released are 350,000 apps. Is it really possible for the government or for regulatory bodies to check at this large scale? And that's what is concerning, and that's why you and I could contribute to actively checking Whether basic things, simple things like are the credentials encrypted? Are the vulnerability checks done? Basic checks that you probably would do in your industry as well, right? So these are the compliance acts, but what are we doing about it? So imagine 2020, a situation where we all had no control. We could not really do much about what's happening. Now, 2022, there are new regulations that have come up. Now it is in our hands to make sure that we could check whether simple things are in place when we use applications as users. So that's where principles of DevOps comes into picture. So DevOps requires end-to-end cross-functional integrations where there's continuous deployments out there. So if there's something that is completely actively in use, like telemedicine apps, or if you're using, so for example, NHS has 3.2 million repeat subscriptions that are happening on the app for prescriptions. And actively, with respect to that, there are 268,000 doctor appointments that are actively happening. So when something is such on a large scale, we need to make sure we have an active check. And that could be over any app, any application that you could check on the user end as well. I'm going to show you how in the next slides. So the basic areas of DevOps that you all can check is one, which is vulnerability. Second is the security checks, the data checks, making sure the regulations, the compliance of the regulations, and making sure that there's active monitoring on the third-party integration. So security breaches are not usually when, it's not usually just in the app, but sometimes when you integrate to probably a financial payment app, or sometimes when you're integrating to a supply chain system, the integration is the leakage point. And that's why DevOps plays a very important role. And that's why we're talking about it. Apart from it, this is where the collaboration comes into picture. Open source communities have increased over the years. I think Sebastian mentioned about the Python communities that are actively there online. You can join them even if you don't have coding experience, because you can actively see whether the documentations are proper, whether the checks are proper. You could even code review on your side and make sure you can contribute actively towards it. And that's what we can all do here. So that responsibility towards making those checks is all together, because one organization, one regulatory body cannot do that together. So that's where we come into picture. Apart from it, I think one key area which needs automation is the regulation checks. So when there are regulatory regulation compliances defined by law, we need some automation tools that can actively see whether that compliance is being followed by the application or not. And that's a great space. There's a company called Merkle Science as well, which is actively doing this for the blockchain space as well. And that's really sought after, because you see so many frauds that happen. And that's exactly, these are the key spaces that require all your inputs. And if you want to make that change, I think this is the starting point as well. One key interesting area that the healthcare industry is working on is graph databases. Graph databases are basically platforms that have many relationships in the data. Now, this is very useful because somebody who's being treated for kidney failure has other vulnerability areas as well. A surgeon probably does one area of focus, right? But there are certain other areas of the body that do get affected. Now, graph databases give you the flexibility to connect information in a multi-dimensional space. And why I'm sharing this with you is because Pfizer, AstraZeneca, and even Myraa Technologies has actively been working on the graph databases. And this is one of the key areas where you can use your database experiences and the security experiences towards different applications onto such platforms. The beauty of the technology today when there are things like Web3 and blockchain is that the open source community and the code bases are put out there for you to participate and see where you can actually contribute actively. So that's where decentralized apps come into picture. There are very couple of interesting decentralized app in the marketplace. Decentralized apps like EHRs, the health records that are saved in a very decentralized manner where the anonymity of the platform is completely maintained. There are a couple of smart contract-based triggers where you could participate with the stakeholder and you're agreeing to share the data only with that stakeholder. If the stakeholder wants to share it with somebody else, for example, if you've agreed to share your information with an insurance company, then you should not get calls from some other stakeholder. That happens to me all the time. I get like thousands of people trying to sell houses or trying to sell policies. That happens to you all on a Sunday afternoon? Yeah? And that's the annoying part about data leakage. That's how it affects us, and then affects our creativity on the Sunday as well, right? So that's what needs to change. And simple actions that requires you to actively go, join the open source communities, actively ask for more questions if you're using an application, try to be aware, try to be making sure that you are checking if they're regulatory compliant. Go and report it if you find there are some regulation leaks, and make sure that you actively check and be a part of the monitoring process, and make sure that if you're building something actively, there's an active, transparent visualization of information, of what all information is flowing in and out of a platform as well. So simple things that really change and make an impact on a large scale. So there are a couple of AI applications as well that are actively being used. Now, the interesting part here is machine learning requires a lot of data. Now, does this data have to exploit a person's privacy? No, because there is online and offline training, and there could be certain amount of data that's only used for the machine learning for the purpose of it, and the user's privacy could be kept separately, and that's exactly what HIPAA compliance requires you to do. So make sure that there's separation of which kind of information is really needed and not required, and make sure that you're subscribing to the right information. Secondly, another point when you take into AI applications into consideration is making sure that the data is well balanced and well inclusive in terms of solutioning as well. Now, continuous deployment and continuous integration, sometimes as we develop apps or something, we plan to do it for one demography first, and then we start expanding. So make sure that you're conscious about the diversity of continuous improvement in different areas to make sure that the application is serving a bigger and larger growing audience as well. So prepare those pipelines in a way that you can concurrently suit those requirements of the growing demands, and make sure that they are factored in the pipeline and the process as well. This is an interesting area because we all have Apple Watches, right? We all are a little more conscious right now when we are running. We're making sure that we're healthy, we're counting our steps, we're counting our calories, and so on. So I think there's a lot of interesting ideas in this space as well. For example, because of the pandemic, there is a lot of awareness of the mental health because people have been indoors and they have been, inside, and they are alone many a times. And one interesting application I want to share with you all is, imagine you could measure the amount of dopamine in your brain that comes, based on the different activities. So if you're running and dancing, you have high dopamine levels. And that gives you reward, and that makes you happy. Like, it's making me happy to see you all here, right? So I think that's another interesting application. Why I'm sharing this with you here is because the DevOps of a wearable device is a little bit more complicated. It's not just one server, or it's not one device, but the way the security of wearable devices are, that needs to be also curated by multiple organizations or multi-party teams actively as well, because the behavior of usage of mobile devices or wearable devices would change based on the demographic. And the company that's really made it must not have factored it many a times. And it's humanly impossible to really factor those use cases many a times for which the people must have used versus for what it was originally intended for. So I think that's another area of making sure that the user stories of anything that's released outside needs to be contributed as well. So if I've launched a wearable device, and maybe it's being misused in a particular way, the company also requires people to put that as contributions from the beta users or from users in general as well. So go ahead and actively make sure that you're communicating, putting things out, contributing, and improving the DevOps, because DevOps, I don't think, would be just one organization, one team, or one person's responsibility, but it's actually an ecosystem that needs to really make sure that is better. So what are we doing in this space? So we are calling people from all walks of life, so that's why I asked as well, to come and join us. We are also running Usha Renal Care Healthcare Association Foundation as well, to build a secure information exchange and actively contribute and make sure it's for the people, so it's not a profit organization, it's a completely non-profit organization for the betterment, because I personally saw the challenges in the pandemic. I saw a lot of people along in this journey, and I think we all are thankful that GITEX is here, actively doing this, making sure that the energy is vibrant and live. So let's all leverage that and actively join. So if you feel where to start, what to do, we welcome you all to join this initiative from all walks of life, and want to make like the biggest community together to be that change and design that change to make sure that we can really make impact. So that's about it from my presentation. I'm available on LinkedIn, and look forward to meet you all and innovate together. Thank you.
Thank you. A huge thank you, Shilpa. If you do want to stay on stage just for a second, we do have time for the next 3 panelists to answer some questions. So we'll start with Shilpa there. Do we have any questions from any members of the audience? Yes. Someone will just bring you a microphone just now, if you just bear with me. Fantastic. Thank you.
So I come from a neuroscience background, and I switched to marketing now. I'm a data scientist also, but the thing is, so how do you think that with data privacy, that it's possible to benefit both the people that work at marketing and the people that work in healthcare? Because I know the issues when it comes to data privacy. I couldn't share anything. I work for the NHS, but now I'm not working, and now I'm working for the other side. And I see the battle between both. How do you think that can be solved?
That's a good one, because I think that's what we are all trying to solve if we all come into the picture. The clear answer would be that if the data of who really require it and who really require this application and who's searching for those kind of users really match. So that means if both the supply and the demand information is matched with consent, that means I am consenting GITEX to share my information, then that's my consent, but not to everyone. I want to be able to choose who I want to. At the same time, I want the healthcare associations or the organizations to be also able to identify who really needs that, and that needs to match with consent. And that very well happens when it's a decentralized application and I get to vote whether I want to really be a part of something or not. So it's right now we have like I agree or sign up or subscribe, but that's not really foolproof. We all know that. But if it's really end-to-end encryption of everything who's in the blockchain or in a platform that's fully by consent driven, then that would be the key. And it's a win-win because there's so much marketing loss when you just blast random information across. So again, that's a loss for the company as well as for the people who are getting spammed. So better AI models to match them anonymously, so that's that's the key. So you don't take their private phone numbers or their mobile device IPs, but you match their interest on different platforms. And then if the person is also consented on top of it, then that information flow needs to happen. That's DevOps again, because the flow of information has to be designed so responsibly. So that would be the key.
Yeah. It's Europe. It's sort of GDPR compliant, so everyone has to do that.
Has to, yeah, yeah. And it has to be open source, so the logic has to be put out there as an organization as well. So, thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Do we have any more questions in the audience? Well, Shilpa, that was really insightful. Thank you so
Thank
much for your
you.
time today.